Hi, my name is Eric Sirwa. I'm from, I guess, Madcap, Ixia background. So today we'll be talking about how to build an ant-based environment around your DITA OT. Because I work for a CCMS company, it's kind of, we're forced to go that route, but in theory, if you are just using, Git repository, SVN repository, you could essentially do the same sort of environment that we built or that we have within our system to do some of the processing that will be discussed. All right, so introduction, we'll go over a little bit of what we call our output generator. We'll go through like kind of how we set things up for launching builds for the DITA OT, and then questions at the end if there's anything. I'm based out of Toronto. I've been, I guess, doing DITA stuff for more than 20 years or so. 10 with Madcap, and then kind of 15 with IBM before that. Have been a DITA member, DITA TC member for, I guess, since the inception. I apologize, I was the one who worked on XML schema stuff, so, good things, bad things, it's still around, but lurking in the backgrounds. All right, so output generator. So in our environment, I guess builds get launched from a number of different, call them clients. We've got a web environment, desktop environment, scheduler. And then within that, because we have to get the content out of the system, we build, this sandbox around builds so that we can do a whole bunch of stuff. And everything is kind of driven by the fact that, I guess, we treat the DITA Open Toolkit as a black box. For most part, it's bring your own OT type thing, right? So, which then gives us kind of high level things that we can do. So at a high level, essentially we've got Java code that sets up a Ant project, and then part of that code is essentially to copy the content to disk. Now, if you're an SVN repository or Git repository, you could essentially do the same thing. Part of the process of setting up your project is extracting content from your repo on disk and copying it to, a central location. And then basically, then the main task of the next job is essentially with that code is essentially calling an Ant build. And then that Ant build underneath the covers will end up calling the DITA Open Toolkit. And most of it is essentially driven by the fact that most of our clients, we treat it as bring your own toolkit, right? So if you've already got something configured, it's working, drop it in. Part of the setup of what we've built is setting up the environment, or like giving all the properties that you required for your job, and then it just kind of goes underneath the covers and runs things. But in doing so, it also allows us to do a whole bunch of pre and post processing of the content. So like Elliot was mentioning, we also use keys. We run into the memory issue, but for a slightly different reason. Our reason is essentially we treat things as products. So I guess within a product you could have 10,000 documents or images or that sort of thing, but when you publish something, you're only needing a subset of that. So if we don't deal with the keys ahead of time, what will end up happening is that the Open Toolkit will try to process all those 10,000 keys, but then say, like, return a whole bunch of errors saying there's 9,000 or 9,500 of them that's not being used, and that uses up processing time, uses up memory. So that's why we've kind of built this environment around the Open Toolkit, so that it allows us to do some of that cleanup. So what we call bundles, we treat things, we're gonna kind of go over it towards at the end as well. We treat things as atomic units or kind of sandboxes when creating builds. So in kind of going back again, yes, like you could create a little bit of Java code that essentially needs 4 things to kind of set up your environment, right? So you need an output folder, one that is slightly different from your regular DITA OT output folder. You could probably skip the output type part, but the main one, what we call the conductor file, so it's just an ant file that essentially has a whole bunch of targets inside of it, and those set up the environment for the open toolkit. And then, yeah, part of it is export. So, so what does that conductor file kind of give us? Because we have a CCMS and it's like bring your own toolkits, we have a number of clients that are using essentially from DITA, still to this day, DITA 1.0 or DITA 1.8 to all the way to DITA 4. And each of those DITA OTs require different versions of Java to run, right? So especially with DITA 4, you need Java 17 to run. You know, DITA 3 runs better on 11. Definitely DITA 1X only runs with, you know, DITA or Java 8. Still don't know really why, but we've tried a few with moving to Java 11, and it just, there's kind of hidden issues that kind of pop up and we never really know why. So just going back to Java 8 just kind of solves the issue. In our environment, same thing. We kind of go, like, it's all your jobs that are going to run with a particular OT, they need a separate conductor file. And this is, you know, essentially similar to a build file that would be part of your plugin, right? So some of this stuff you could, in theory, kind of do as part of your own build file, and, you know, call the open toolkit or call the actual, just the command to run the HTML later on. But I guess in our instance, it's a lot easier or cleaner to basically have it not as part of the plugin, because we don't control necessarily what clients bring to us. We want to treat the OT as a black box, so that we've built stuff around it, so that basically the integration part is just a lot easier for us on our end. So the next piece is setting up all the different parameters, and then that creates a bunch of build scripts for the OT. And then, so this is what one of them looks like. So as you can see here, you know, if you're doing a PDF, then we support multiple renderers, so we'll set that up if there's a DITA val, and then if we need to pass parameters to the OT, those, you know, end up in a separate build.properties file. And then at this point, this also creates like a build.bat file that essentially calls the open toolkit from the command line. And then you can see some of these things that we end up doing prior to calling the open toolkit. And one is, you know, resolving key refs. So we convert, in our particular case, what we call like the system keys. Those are all converted back to hrefs. So so that we don't have to deal with the, you know, the load of key processing. If in your own content you create your own, what you'll call like your own custom keys or human readable keys, those aren't touched at all. So this is one piece to essentially make the processing pipeline a lot easier and faster and not use up a whole bunch of memory. Then we've got our own image extraction stuff. But coming back to Amit, like if you needed to do image pre-processing, so converting EPSs to PDF or SVGs to PNGs, for, you know, depending on your different processing, this is all where it would happen. So yeah, so kind of going on a little bit more of what we do. So create AND targets to basically call in the OT, where you can do custom ant tasks. Yep, and then we'll set the PDF formatter depending on, you know, which one your company uses, and then set the OTs. So here are some of the common build tasks that we do prior to sending stuff to the OT. Chunking's coming in again. We have like a review process where we generate one big HTML file, and the chunking process kind of messes a bit with that. So we'll do a whole bunch of processing. So one of the ones that we've done recently kind of is for generalizing the learning and training map, because in the UTDs, it's got hard-coded chunk values on certain elements, or some of the L&T elements. So that's causing problems when you try to generate one single file. So by converting it to just a generalized map, we kind of get away from that process, and that, you know, essentially doesn't break. So here we go, same thing, image and resource pre-processing. We support, like, we'll do predictable file names, so kind of like Copy2 is doing now, where we convert kind of our garbled mess of ID file names to something that's more human readable, especially if you're pumping some stuff out to HTML or like a URL where you don't want, you know, a gobbledygook of file names to be seen in the URL. And then same thing, the push stuff to content to sites, or pulling in from other silos. So we're starting to get more companies kind of requesting being able to pull content from Git repos, whether their own internal repos from development, that sort of stuff, so that it can be, so that content can be integrated into the system, or I guess into the DITA map. And then push to external sites is essentially like stuff like Zoom In or Fluid Topics, but also for internal kind of business process pipelines, we need to push stuff to this from our environment to their S3 buckets and that sort of thing. So these are the sort of things that are commonly done, I guess, within our environment where we've built the ANT process around it. So, and then the other thing that's more for our environment is as well, so we treat all of our builds as an atomic bundle or a sandbox of content. The main reason for that is we can, you know, repeat builds without having to extract the content a whole bunch of times from the system, especially from a development point of view, like we're trying to fix bugs for the client. Also with our partners, where essentially, you know, clients have other partners for building PDFs or that sort of thing. So external vendors, so being able to treat all of our builds as kind of an atomic bundle of content makes it easier to share with third party and external vendors. And then kind of see what some of those things look like. So this is, I guess, a build that would be similar to a project. We call them build manifests, where clients want to build a multilingual PDF. So we extract all the content out of the system. We can see all the different languages that are there, and then what we'll do is that we'll, part of that initial pre-processing is that we'll stitch all the different languages back into the English root map and then send that to the OT for processing. And then the open toolkit at that point doesn't even know that it's, you know, there's been a ton of work that's happened ahead of time, and it just processes it as if it were presented to it with all the languages already been there. So, cool. Do you guys have any questions? Or? Oh.
So you're doing that with ANT. Have you explored at all, like the idea of doing that with like a project file from the toolkit or something like that? Of course, you have to support open versions that don't support that. You have something that has to work on old versions too, or? Yeah.
So part of it is our build manifest stuff kind of way predates project stuff. So we haven't really explored project files, mainly because we already have something that's there. But if a client did want to use project files, that would be easy enough to support as well. Mainly because either creating a project file or it exists somewhere else in the doc base, we could pull it out and then just send it off to the open toolkit, and no one's the wiser of where it came from. Going once, going twice. Perfect. All right. Thank you very much.